Is January 2025 D-Day for you? That's right, divorce. Is this the year that you get divorced? Most people are really glad to get it over with. Is this you? Is this maybe your spouse? What are some of the signs that you might be looking for to decide if 2025 is the year when you finally pull the trigger?
Ruby Bolton is the founding attorney for the Bolton Law Firm, one of the largest law firms specializing in divorce located in Montgomery County, Texas, including a practice in Harris County. Ruby Bolton is board certified as a family law specialist by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. Ruby is a super lawyer designated by Thomson Reuters. Ruby is one of the best, designated by the Houston Chronicle, and she would love to share everything she's learned in the last 30 years with you.
Is 2025 the year you're going to get divorced? I have a ton of people that kind of hold their breath and wait for the holidays to be over. They think, let me make it past one more Christmas, one more Thanksgiving, and they're gritting their teeth and they're thinking, as soon as this is over, it's time for me to file. Is this you? Is this maybe your spouse? What are some of the signs that you might be looking for to decide if 2025 is the year when you finally pull the trigger? I want to start by saying the only person who can really decide if you should get divorced is you. And I'm confident that you would make that with a whole lot of thought. But I have had 30 years experience talking to a lot of people who have filed, who have completed the divorce, who have regretted filing, or who have been thrilled to death that they finally did and wish, like anything, that they could have done it sooner. So I thought it would be really interesting to talk about some of the different reasons that people tell me that they're getting divorced, and then how they tend to feel about it as the divorce progresses, because there's a big mix in there. I also want to say there's not usually just one reason why anybody gets divorced. There's a whole lot that goes on in a marriage, and usually there's some things that work and some things that don't work in every single marriage out there. So I don't intend for people to listen to this and say, I've got that. I guess that means I should be filing for divorce. There is not a single marriage that doesn't have some things that are not working. And likewise, even the very worst marriages, the marriages that I think people are the most glad to exit, there might be a moment or two that do. So this isn't black and white, check the box. This is, let's look, what's working in your marriage and what isn't? And is this the type of thing that I see ends in people who are really glad that they pulled that trigger and got divorced? So this episode I'm going to entitle 12 Good Reasons to Get Divorced and 6 Bad Ones. And I think I have seen just about all of these. So let's buckle down and take a look at it. First thing that I want you to think about is, how long have you been thinking about divorce? And is it a point now where it's inevitable? You know it's going to happen. And you're just sitting there and you're waiting and you're afraid of that boom dropping, but you know it's going to happen. And if you have reached the point when it's inevitable, when you know absolutely for certain that you're going to be getting divorced, most people are really glad to get it over with. Now, I'm not telling you that the divorce process is fun or that you're going to enjoy it, but if it's been hanging over your head for a long time, I see a lot of clients that feel a whole lot better the second they just get things moving. So before we delve into all the different reasons, if you've given up on your marriage, if you don't feel like there's any possibility for whatever reason, for any of these reasons, for combinations of them, for something I have not even come up with, if you have decided and you know in your heart that your marriage is over, it's probably better to get the divorce over quickly. Most people find this period where they're gnawing and going back and forth and worrying to be the very worst period. And if the decision has been made, go ahead and jump in, get it over with, and let's go about making your life better. So I would say the number one good reason to get divorced, and when I say number one, they're just the order I'm going in. I'm not trying to say the most common. I'm not trying to say the worst. Reason number one that I would consider a good reason that I hear people getting divorced: violence. And it's not something I hear just from women. I have had men come in my office and talk about the fact that their spouse is violent with them and they just can't handle it anymore. Or I've heard women that are genuinely afraid of their spouse. And in my view, I see a lot of people who have this issue and they still end up staying with that partner and staying married. And I always find that a little frustrating. Not because I want everybody in the world to get divorced, but because people that are in a physically abusive relationship, they need out. They need help. And it's a hard thing to walk away from. And too often I see people that are in physically abusive relationships. They'll get started and then they get scared. And for whatever reason, they end up going right back in. I would say if you are in a physically abusive relationship, there's only two really good places to go from there. One is that both of you are actively working with a counselor and taking steps to correct it, or you're leaving. And there really shouldn't be any other ground in between. So, second reason I see, infidelity, serial infidelity. This is a reason I frequently see people be very glad that they got divorced because their spouse simply could not be faithful. I've had people confide in me that they found out that their spouse cheated on them on their honeymoon, the day before the wedding, throughout the entire marriage. And they kept thinking that it was going to get better, and it didn't. And I've also had people who were awfully glad to leave a marriage where there was one affair. And one affair was just one too many. Third good reason why I see people filing for divorce and not regretting it: substance abuse. I see this quite a lot. And I'm going to say it's mostly alcohol. Now, I see cocaine, I see methamphetamines, I see marijuana, I see acid, you name it. I see prescription drug abuse is actually, I would probably say after alcohol, the one that I see most often. But there are a lot of people out there struggling with substance abuse. And a lot of times the person who is struggling with substance abuse, they do a really good job of saying that they're dealing with the problem. But they're not, and nothing's actually changing. And I see a lot of people that file for divorce from somebody who has been struggling with substance abuse that they don't see making any progress, and they're just done. And in almost all those cases, I see people really glad that they filed and really glad that they're moving forward. So that brings me to the next issue. Where you have people with substance abuse, that goes hand in hand an awful lot with mental health. And I will say that filing for divorce because the spouse has a mental health problem that they either will not or cannot deal with is one of the big reasons that I see people saying that they want out and that they're glad that they left the marriage and they would never want to go back. Now, I know that there are a lot of people that stay with people that have mental health issues. And I've heard people say, you know, we got married for sickness or for health. And I don't feel good about walking away from somebody because they're struggling with mental health. And I've just got to say, look at your life. If you've got children, look at your children's life. How much is it affecting it? And is this something that you can compartmentalize, that you can be there for your spouse who's struggling and also live a normal and healthy life yourself. Because there definitely comes a time, and whether it's depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, I hear a lot about narcissism, borderline personality disorder. If your spouse has a mental health issue and it is seriously affecting your life or the lives of your children, when I see people filing for divorce for that reason, I see a lot of relief. I see sometimes guilt, but mostly I see people really glad to be out of that situation. Number 5, financial irresponsibility. Now, I use the word irresponsibility on purpose because it means wildly different things to different people. To some people, financial irresponsibility means that you already have 4 pairs of shoes and you just bought number 5 and you don't need it, even if it was on sale. And then to other people, financial irresponsibility means you cashed in our entire life savings and spent it all on day trading, and now we're going to lose the house. So everybody has the level that they are comfortable at. Where I see people exiting marriage, being really happy that they're exiting a marriage, is where their comfort level at saving or spending is radically different from their spouse. And it really doesn't matter where it falls, meaning that you can have 2 people who are super skinflints. You know, they're gonna stretch every penny. They're gonna eat leftover fries on somebody else's table, but they both feel that way. And so they can be really happy together. And then I see people that, you know, filing bankruptcy, facing foreclosure, but they both feel that way. They're both okay with it. And they can be very happy together. But whatever your comfort level is, if your spouse has a radically different comfort level and the 2 of you can't work that out, I see that ending in a lot of happy divorces. 6, non-compatible lifestyle. Boy, can this mean a whole lot of different things, right? I hear some people tell me that their spouse is a workaholic. All they ever do is work. All they want to do is work. And really what I think of sometimes here is like the King of Queens. And if you look at Doug, he doesn't want to be a manager, right? But Carrie wants to be a successful paralegal. She wants to have a career. She wants him to go into management. They have very different ideas of what kind of lifestyle they should be living. How committed should they be to their work? I see this also, how committed should you be to your family? You know, some people feel like every single day you should be home having a family meal. And if somebody puts work above having a family dinner, then that's not something that they can handle. It's a lifestyle choice. You know, some people want to, even living in the city versus living out in the country, you'd think, well, surely that's something that people can work over. Well, not always. I have definitely seen what type of place are we going to live where they simply cannot, either of them, reconcile themselves to the other's way of thinking, and they're just glad they're no longer trying to. And that in the future, they're going to be able to make the choices they want to make. And whether the choices they want to make are that every single weekend is going to swim competitions and soccer games, or that every other weekend is traveling somewhere exotic or working late in the office, or they're going to, you know, live on a farm. They want to make the lifestyle choices that they want to make. So whatever that means to you, if the way you want to spend your average day is wildly out of sync with the way that your spouse wants to spend that average day, maybe one of you wants to spend it together and the other one doesn't. They want to spend it apart. That's incompatible lifestyles. And that is one of the driving factors that I've seen behind people that at the end of the day, they're like, whew, you know, that person was a good person, but we just were not happy together. Number 7, reasons why I see people getting divorced and being glad that they got divorced. High conflict arguments. Now, I talked earlier about physical abuse. This is not physical abuse. This is just high conflict, yelling. This is arguments. This is accusations. And for some people, that's normal, right? You can get that just from turning on I was going to say the TV and show my age, but if you just look at, clips out there, social media, there are people that I'm not doing anything. I'm just yelling at my husband. I can do that anytime. And then there are other people that they do not ever want to yell. And so again, this is kind of like financial irresponsibility, meaning that most people have a level of conflict that they are comfortable with. I have seen people that were so conflict averse that they were horribly, horribly unhappy in their marriage for 10 or 12 reasons, and we file for divorce and we get to mediation and their spouse is like, they never told me. I had no idea. I didn't know they felt this way. And my client might be like, I couldn't handle the argument. So there are some people not willing to have any type of conflict, and that can be really difficult to live with as well. I mean, if you can never be sure how your spouse feels about something, even something little like what movie do you want to see or where do you want to go to dinner, and the spouse is so concerned about everybody getting along that they're never going to have an opinion. Well, that's a disparity in the amount of conflict that you're comfortable with. Now, on the other hand of the end of the spectrum, I think one of the saddest abuse stories that I ever heard, and this is going back to physical, and it doesn't need to be physical, it can be verbal and yelling and just anger in general. A woman was asked, when you fill up your gas tank, how do you do it? Is there a special way that you do it? She said, yes, I will use the gas cap to hold the gas back so that it flows in on its own without me holding it. Is there a reason you do it that way? Yeah, her husband had decided that was the best way. And when he saw that she didn't do it that way, he beat her. So I don't mean to show terrible extremes, right? You might be in a situation where somebody yells because you're voting for a different presidential candidate than they are, or because you loaded the dishwasher differently than they did. Whatever it is, I see a lot of people being very glad that they are exiting a marriage where one spouse was comfortable with a higher level of conflict than the other. So right alongside high conflict, we've got emotional abuse. And I know that there's going to be some people out there saying, oh, this is, you asked me if I liked your shoes and I didn't answer and now I'm emotionally abusive. No, emotional abuse can really be a very real thing. It stems usually from a very lopsided power dynamic where one person is constantly trying to please the other in the relationship. And over time, that becomes more and more pronounced. And you get to a point where one person is scared to death to, oh, I burnt the dinner and I don't want my spouse to find out that I did this, or I bought Coke and that's going to be perceived as wasting money. Or, or you see situations where people are made to feel horribly, horribly guilty about things that are, quite honestly, very normal. So, for instance, I think we all agree it's much better not to ever yell at children. I will tell you, it's awfully rare to find a household in which it's never happened. And yet I've been part of divorces where there's a list of 4 times that you've yelled at our children, and don't you think you should, be lose custody or not visitation, or maybe you need to get mental help. And to me, in that particular situation, my client looking at it seemed actually very not just normal, but more gentle. But she had a spouse that absolutely never raised his voice. Sure was mean though. Was awfully, awfully mean. And if you're in a situation where your spouse, they never raise their voice, they never, yell at you or beat you, and yet you're constantly feeling, did I do this right? Are they unhappy with me? Do they regret marrying me? That's a very emotionally abusive situation. And when I support clients, when I have clients getting divorced who have been in that kind of relationship, I see a lot of difficulty adjusting to where they're constantly second guessing themselves as it goes on. But I don't think I have ever seen somebody in the type of situation I've described that regretted filing for divorce. And yes, we do talk about it. And I'll sometimes call up people after their case is over, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I have never spoken with somebody that was in a truly emotionally abusive situation that was not really glad that they walked away. So, 9th reason that I see people being glad that they got divorced. One of you wants kids and one doesn't. Now, hopefully you have this discussion before actually having children. But I've seen this be a reason after the children are born as well, where one spouse didn't participate in birth control, and then the other spouse is very angry that suddenly they're a parent and they never wanted to be. But even where you have no misbehavior on the part of either, maybe there's an accidental pregnancy, and yes, they absolutely happen. Or perhaps you've got 2 people that, hey, I'm at a certain stage in my life, and if I'm going to have kids, it's time for me to have kids. And the spouse is saying, well, I still really don't want them. If having a family is important to you and your spouse does not want one, which is a choice we see more and more people making today, that's another situation where you're probably going to be glad that you walked away. So right along that is incompatible styles in raising children. And again, I'm hoping that this discussion is being had before the kids are born, that they're talking about, are you okay with corporal discipline? Or what do you think ought to happen in this situation? Or I want to be there for every important moment in my child's life. Or I am going to require that my child get X number of grades, or they be involved in this type of activity. Ideally, you're having that discussion beforehand, and you're thinking about divorce because you realize there's just no possible way the 2 of you can raise children together, and you might both want kids. But I also see this happen after the children are born. And sometimes, unfortunately, these lead to the most acrimonious divorces because both people, they might have 2 very different styles of parenting, right? I think like ADD medication is a big one. I see that a lot, where one parent says, you know what, I struggled with it, or my child is having a problem with it. Let's address it. Let's medicate the child. And the other parent is like, well, they're medicating them out of who they are. And children need to be allowed to grow and develop and do everything naturally. And you're not doing that to my child. So what you get is 2 parents who deeply, deeply love their child that have completely different ideas of how to handle a problem the child is having. And they tend to end up in custody battles. And unfortunately, the fighting doesn't usually stop after the divorce because after the divorce, you're still going to be talking about, well, I can't believe that would be so harsh for this, or how could your mom do that, or how could your dad do that, or why didn't they do this, or this child is having this problem because the other parent wouldn't listen to me. So that, unfortunately, just different choices in how to parent, I see that happening a lot. And usually that leads to the kind of high conflict situation and the children being right in the middle of it. And I think most child psychologists will tell you, if those parents cannot reconcile, if they cannot come to terms, if they cannot come to an agreement on these important decisions, the sooner that you separate the parents, the better for the child's future health. I'm going to say religious incompatibility is another reason that I see people filing for divorce. Now, you might be thinking, now hold on, I'm Baptist, he's Catholic, we're super happy. And a lot of people have no problem. You might have an agnostic or an atheist married to, a Methodist, and nobody really cares and everybody gets along just fine. But if I'm making a list of reasons that people got divorced and said later that they were really glad they did, there's no way I can leave this out. I've seen cases where people came into the marriage on the same page when it came to religion, and one of them had a change of heart. And it meant that they could no longer live a joint life together. I've seen cases where they come in without a religion and one party becomes deeply religious. And once again, you have a situation where they can't seem to get along. Now, there are a whole lot of people that do. So back to what I initially said, most divorces are not caused by just one thing. So all of the things that we just talked about, I see in divorces where at the end of the day, my client is really glad that they're out of that marriage. So I will say that those are 12 good reasons to get divorced. But I also promised you 6 bad ones. I'm going to also say sometimes people cite a bad reason when there are really good ones in there. So don't think that if you've got one of these bad reasons, that means you shouldn't be filing. Remember, I am not telling you whether or not you should file. This is just things I have seen where people have regretted it afterwards. So I'm going to say the number one thing that I see people regretting is when they do it to show their spouse they're serious. They want to rock the world. They want to be taken seriously. And maybe it's about something big like, should we or shouldn't we have children? Maybe it's about something small like, I don't want to go to New Braunfels this year for vacation. I want to go somewhere else. But for whatever reason, I see on a regular basis people that decide the way they're going to win the argument, the way they're going to underline and get their spouse to sit up and pay attention is to file for divorce. And a lot of these times, this person has no intention of actually getting divorced at all. I had one client come in who she'd filed on her own 3 times. Her husband had filed on his own twice. And I think at that point, there'd been so much game of chicken. I mean it, no, you don't. Yes, I do. That she decided, well, I'm going to hire a lawyer this time, and this time I'll be taken more seriously. So why do I think this is a bad reason to get divorced? Divorce is a big, serious step, and it should not be done as a threat. So I will say that, for instance, if you're not willing to continue your marriage as it is, and you're really ready to walk if a change is not made, well, that's different. That's filing for divorce, and maybe your spouse, enters a treatment facility or, starts coming home every day to be with the children, or whatever it was that you were not willing to continue that. They make a change. and then you don't want to pursue the divorce anymore. I've got no problem with that. That's fine. But what I like to say to clients when they come in is think really hard. If your spouse will not change whatever the behavior is that you are trying to get them to change by filing, do you want out? And for some people, the answer is no. It's like, well, yeah, I want my wife to quit spending money, but if she's not willing to quit buying, Prada purses, I'm still going to be married to her. I'm just going to continue to be unhappy about it. If you do not think that you would be better off divorced than in your life as it is, don't file. I like to tell people your chances of getting divorced are greatly increased by you filing for divorce. So, filing for divorce to get your spouse's attention, to show them that you mean business, bad idea. Very bad idea. And this is probably the number one area in which I've seen people regret filing. They file for divorce because they think their spouse is going to wake up, their spouse is going to change, they're going to realize that they were wrong in every argument they ever had, and they're going to come back with their hat in their hand, I'm so sorry, let me make it up to you. And instead, the spouse's response is, you know what, I am not happy either. And next thing you know, you're divorced. So, you don't want to file to send a message. You don't want to file to encourage your spouse to fight for you. You only file for divorce if at the end of the day you prefer a divorce to the situation you've currently got. So the second bad reason to file for divorce, your new coworker is really hot. And you might think I'm kidding. I am not kidding. I have seen lots of people interested. I don't know how many of them file, but there are plenty that want to ask questions about what a divorce would look like. And why? Because there's someone in their life they're attracted to. They're not even in a relationship, but they're attracted to somebody else. And maybe they're thinking, I wouldn't even be attracted to this person if I had a good marriage. So that might mean it's time to exit. Well, I got news for you. You can have the best marriage in the entire world, and you're still going to notice when somebody else is attractive. And so finding out that somebody attractive, that you are turned on by somebody, probably not a good reason to file for divorce. Number 3, and again, you're going to think this is a joke. This is not a joke. Everyone in your friend group is getting divorced. Yeah, you're thinking nobody is going to get divorced because everyone in their friend group is getting divorced. That is not true. Statistically, that is the highest indicator of divorce. If your closest friends, if you have multiple ones of your closest friends who are getting divorced, just as a matter of statistics, that is a more accurate indicator that you're likely to get divorced than infidelity, than infertility, than financial issues, than different religions. No. Number 1, your best friends are doing it. So if you find yourself thinking about it, and I don't think anybody is at home saying, well, Janie's getting divorced and Melissa's getting divorced, I should get divorced. But what they are saying is, this person seems happier, and this person seems happier. Or, I'm also frustrated. So I would just encourage you, if you're in that situation, if you have 1 or 2 best friends who are getting divorced, and you find yourself thinking, how good is my marriage really? Do a hard examination of why are you thinking that? Because divorce is usually very permanent. And your friends, they might reconcile and stay married, or they might hate being single, or they might be in a marriage that they hate even more. You got to make your choices based on your life. So look really closely if you find yourself thinking about it. And coincidentally, some important people in your life are doing it too. Next one I put, you just saw your old girlfriend. So I've been doing this for 30 years, a long time. And I will tell you, when Facebook first became popular, holy smokes, did that prompt a lot of divorces. And I mean it. I mean a lot. Because before, you might have always had a crush on somebody that you went out with in high school, but you didn't see them all the time, right? And suddenly with social media, you're looking at pictures and they're looking a lot better. And I'm just going to say that is something that there are some people who definitely run into an ex. They end up getting divorced. They end up with their ex. They end up happier. I'm not saying that never happens. But if you're asking me, what situations have I seen where somebody filed for divorce and regretted it because they recently ran into an ex? That's a big one. You don't usually end up with the ex. If you do end up with the ex, they probably still have the same issues that you didn't like about them when you went out with them before. So look real hard if that's why you're doing it. So the next one is citizenship. Green card marriages are real. They are very, very real. I've done divorces for people who had green card marriages. It's just a very sad thing when that's the motivation behind a marriage. So you might say, but this is about divorce. Well, because they almost always end that way. If somebody has gotten married for the purpose of getting citizenship in the United States, almost always they're going to end up in divorce. And I've seen this with mail order brides. I've seen this with people that, were here illegally and were trying to gain legal status. I have seen this with people that, had a relationship that they thought might end up in marriage eventually, but time was running out and it's do or die, make a decision. And the ability to stay in this country was the final deciding factor. That ends up usually in a divorce. So when I say a bad reason to get divorced, well, if you got married for that reason, then I guess it's a good reason to get divorced. But I'm going to keep it in the bad category. It's just that you made your bad choice back when you first tied the knot. So the next thing I'm going to mention, I don't know if this is serious. It's not like I've had anybody come in and say it. But, I put down, if Ben Affleck and J-Lo can't make it, like what chance do we have? I'm just going to say that divorce is sometimes trendy. Sometimes a lot of people are kind of getting divorced and you get to a certain point in your life and you look at other people who are free and different and out there and you're thinking, I want something new. Divorce, it's something new, all right, but it's throwing out an awful lot old. And before you throw out that old, take a good look and make sure it's something that you really want to say goodbye to. So that is it for 12 good reasons to get divorced and 6 bad ones. I hope that you learned a lot. Please shoot me a message. Let me know if I've left some out. Let me know if you think my bad reasons are actually great reasons to get divorced. Or if you think that someone can have every single one of those good reasons to get divorced and they'd still be a lot happier sticking with their marriage. I want to hear from you and we can address it at a later podcast.